It's a teen talk skating podcast where I embarrass myself. Hello, 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 and welcome to episode number 84 of a Teen Talks Game podcast. My name is Van Gogh, and I hope you guys are all doing very, very well. I have just come back from a dinner out and a couple other things because of a birthday thing, so I'm kind of tired after all that, but of course, it's Friday night, so I have to record my podcast episode. I hope you guys are all doing very well. I do want to say apologies to all the people watching the podcast or listening to the podcast on YouTube. I don't know why, but like basically what's happening is that I upload the episode through Spotify podcast and it's supposed to go to YouTube automatically, and it does, but it sets it on private, and I have no idea why because it should be setting it on public automatically. That's how I have it set. But I will continue to try to figure it out and work on it. But if I can't get it done automatically, I'll just do it manually. And so people on YouTube thinking that I have not been uploading, I have been uploading. It just doesn't show on YouTube. But I do upload every single Saturday. But yeah, if you guys ever want to watch the podcast and it's not available on YouTube for a while because I haven't gotten there yet, go listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a few other Podbean and other things that are going on. But yeah, anyway, I hope you guys are all doing very well. Right now I'm kind of trying to work on myself as a person, like work on my new perspective and everything. School is kind of going like school. Like I have so many tests and projects and things to do. It's just like so overwhelming. But yeah, I'm just trying to relax and trying to focus on myself too and learning to love myself, I think, in that way. But yeah, we're trying to do that. But anyway, I guess before I start yapping way too much about my terrible state of emotions, I should probably go to our program of the week. I need to move my computer. Oh my gosh. So yeah, let's go over to our program of the week. Yes. Program of the week. Okay, our program of the week this week is a program I feel like it's now a classic, but back then it wasn't considered maybe like an instant classic, but now I feel like it is an instant classic. Maybe not a really well-known classic, but definitely now like a cult classic if you're deep within the figure skating community. And it's a program I really enjoy, and it comes from Tessa Virtue and Scott Moyer, the Canadian ice dance team. This is their 2008 World's Free Dance to the Umbrellas of Cherbourg by Michel Legrand. I think Virtue and Moyer are obviously very well known for their Moulin Rouge program in 2018 at the Olympics, but 10 years earlier, I would honestly say that this program to the Umbrellas of Cherbourg is quite possibly kind of the Moulin Rouge before the Moulin Rouge. It carries a lot of the same emotion and passion, maybe not in the more of a saucy, spicy, fun way, but in a very emotional, heartfelt, and almost elegant and maybe innocent way. And so this program is definitely very much a romance program. I believe the movie itself, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, is a romance movie as well. But Virtue and Moyer really bring this with a lot of simplicity, but a lot of new elements that are not necessarily seen a lot. First off, they start off with twizzles like 5 seconds in the program. They have no speed going into those twizzles. And I really do think it's impressive. I always see twizzles obviously going into the first set of twizzle with so much speed, but these ones like start off from basically standing position and they still go pretty quick within the rotation itself. Maybe they don't travel as far because they don't have that as much of that momentum, but it still does very much look very nice and they're very well synchronized and it's very nice. I loved a lot of the lifts in this program. I think all of the lifts were used effectively with the music. A lot of the high notes in the music were being used with the lifts. So let me think. There is this moment where she kind of has a lift, Tessa Virtue. She's in a lift where she's standing on uh, Scott Moyer's leg and he's holding her leg and she's almost in a Buellin position. She's kind of holding her leg back and she's almost leaning back too. It looks scary, but so impressive because it looks very stable as a team and they look very stable and cohesive in that way. Another element I really enjoyed, which I don't normally enjoy in ice dance programs, was the pair combination spin or the dance spin. Sorry, the dance spin, not the pair combination spin. The dance spin here is very elegant, and it's I think the outfits make it look very nice. My favorite moment has to be when kind of Tessa Virtue's in this kind of sit spin position really low, and Scott Moore is holding her. But then she goes up into a one-handed Bielman position, or kind of a half camel, half Bielman position. And it's really impressive because that transition looks very soft and elegant. And it's almost like Scott Moore lifts that leg up for her. It's just, it looks very smooth. And I don't know, when I saw it, it was just like, that's so aesthetic and so nice and clean and smooth in that way. I love the moment in this program where Scott Moore, he's skating, they're both skating straight down the ice. Scott Moore goes into a lunge and she leans onto his knee that's in front of the lunge and she kind of lays back on it. I think it's a beautiful moment, kind of skating forward in a lunge position and not losing any speed, good speed throughout. A lot of the nice, a lot of good footwork through this program, a lot of passion again. This is very light music. This is very kind of two characters speaking and singing to each other about how much they love each other. And a lot of that passion is really there. It doesn't feel overly passionate, but it doesn't feel so boring either. It's a very light passion in a very lighthearted way, and I think that's a beautiful emotion and feeling to capture. So yeah, definitely go check it out. Tessa Virtue and Scott Moyer at the 2008 World Figure Skating Championships in the free dance, skating to the Umbrellas of Cherbourg by Michel Legrand. Yeah, time for our main episode. That was your program of the week. Okay, guys, like you heard, now it is time for our main episode, and I want to say that I feel like a genius because of this. I was thinking about an episode idea right after I had recorded the last episode, episode number 83, which you should totally check out. It was a completely amazing episode about what was it about? It was about the competition. What was it? Actually, what was it? Oh, all the summer competitions that you should know about. Anyway, I was thinking about an episode idea right after it, and I know I wanted to do a video essay or, an analysis of the skating world. But I was really struggling, and then this idea suddenly came into mind, and I just thought it was absolutely perfect because I really, really thought about it. Just like I don't know, all of a sudden, all these ideas about this one, main idea, all these branching theories and thoughts and what I could say, kind of branched off, and I just felt like such a genius. You know what I mean? Like I just felt like a genius for coming up with that so nicely and effectively. But if only I were that smart at school. So, like I just said, this week's episode is a video essay episode, which I know sounds confusing because there technically is no video, but this is really inspired by the kind of format that a lot of YouTubers are doing on YouTube, where they kind of sit down in front of a camera and discuss kind of big topics that are relevant to the world, usually like popular culture, I would say. Things like fast fashion and the Met Gala, and any huge issues that are a huge debate, like politics, even can become a video essay. But obviously, this podcast is not a video podcast, so it is just a normal, like, audio podcast. So I guess I should be calling them audio essays, but whatever. So the idea of these video essay-esque episodes is that I take an issue within figure skating and I analyze it. It might not even be an issue, it just might be a huge topic of contention or a topic that is, something very important to me or relatable or anything like that. And so today's episode and today's topic, which I have done tons of these before, I've done them on social media and fame and identity and all these crazy things in figure skating. Today, I want to discuss the idea of the rivalry in figure skating, especially considering if these rivalries are really real or are they really just a product of media and society's constant search for entertainment. So in figure skating, there's all these rivalries. In all sports, honestly, there's rivalries, right? People are constantly pitted against each other. Which one will become top in the world? Which one will become number one? Which one will win this competition? So I want to consider if these rivalries are actually real in the sense that they actually are from the perspective of the two people or the two groups that are in the rivalry, or are they just really a product of media and society's kind of constant want for drama and entertainment and joy and something tension and conflict. So I've brainstormed and I thought about the several types of rivalries in figure skating with a lot of examples to discuss about each one. And then at the end of this episode, I'll give you my actual final thoughts about this idea of the rivalry and if it really does exist and why society has made it exist, if it does exist, if that makes sense. So again, I'm going to talk about several types of rivalries with all these different examples, and I'll tell you my final thoughts at the very end. Last week, I know I said the word summer a lot because I was talking about all the summer competitions, and a lot of them have the word summer in them. This week, it's definitely the word rivalry that's getting overused over and over and over. Yeah, you're gonna hear the word rivalry a lot. And I feel like I feel like I say that word weird a lot. Rivalry? Is that how you say it? Rivalry. They had a rivalry. It's one of those words I really have to enunciate. Like, I can't say conversation. I always end up saying conservation instead of conversation even when I write it down. Like, I'm just dumb in that way, sorry. But anyway, yeah, me and my annoying voice are gonna rant for like 50 minutes about this topic of rivalries. So first off, of course, what is a rivalry? Kind of like I explained earlier, it is really when two people, or honestly two groups, two duos, etc., are kind of pitted against each other. They're seen as enemies, they're seen as two people, two groups wanting the same goal. And in this case, in figure skating, it's clearly to be world number one, or win the world championships, or win the Olympics, or win this, the four continents, the Europeans, etc. These rivalries are often not a one-time event. Um, in the sense that they are not just like for one competition or for one event, they are for multiple events and multiple years and multiple seasons. So, for example, like two people could be in a rivalry for literally like 5 years over the same titles, and then it might be leading up to the Olympics, for example. Like in the case of figure skating, there's often a main rivalry across the quad, the 4 years leading up to the Olympics. And so that might be a good example of a rivalry, is that kind of specific leading up to that ultimate goal of the Olympics. And so, like I said earlier, there's no way, honestly, of telling if this rivalry is really real. Like, if the people in it really see each other as enemies and, not kind of fighting for the same goal, or if these people are simply just products of the media and society and the rivalries actually don't really exist. And we're going to talk about it, especially in regards to figure skating, because I think figure skating is quite a unique sport when it comes to these rivalries, in the sense that I think there's a bit more personal free will in it almost, but I will get to that later for sure. So yeah, the first type of rivalry I have is an international political or historical or economical kind of rivalry. So it's one of the few times I feel like that outside factors really factor into figure skating, in my opinion. Outside factors meaning that it's not within the sport itself, rather it exists in just society and life, such as culture and historical differences. So maybe two countries maybe don't have the best history together or political relationship together. Um, and the skaters of those two countries are going against each other. They have two big name skaters that are kind of going against each other. So again, this deals more with history and politics rather than the sport itself. It's not kind of in the difference of how these two skaters or two teams skate. It's more or less about the countries that they are from, that the countries that they represent are, conflicting or have conflicted in the past, or have kind of a deep history for a very long time. And so I would say that my main example of this would be Yuna Kim and Mao Asada, both women single skaters, and their main rivalry from like 2006 to about 2014. Though I do know both of them kind of had ups and downs throughout those years. Yuna Kim didn't compete for like one of those years. So yeah, Yuna Kim is from South Korea, representing the Republic of Korea, and Mao Asada is from Japan. And although Wikipedia and Reddit have both said that they used to be close friends when they were juniors, this is kind of a case where history kind of ties everything in, because South Korea and Japan have a very complicated historical and political relationship. If you want to go back to history class, Japan did colonize South Korea for a while, and they did commit a lot of like atrocities over there. They very much subjugated the people in Korea and made them speak Japanese, changed their names to Japanese names. And yeah, it was kind of a process of trying to get Korea to kind of lose its culture back during the 40s, I think the 30s and the 40s, and in World War II as well, when Japan took over Korea. And yeah, lots of complicated history there. And obviously, I think the main thing also is that that's kind of more recent history. That isn't even 100 years ago that kind of South Korea or Korea in general and Japan were in kind of conflict over Japan's terrible treatment of South Korea and its colonization, and Japan being seen as the or trying to make itself the superior power in Asia. And so, that's your little historical background. But then this, I think, somewhat led to this very fierce rivalry between Kim and Mao Zedong. It's very influenced by kind of nationalistic views, right? It wasn't necessarily that they were different skaters. It wasn't necessarily that they skated in different ways, which they did, but that wasn't really the main reason. The main reason was rather the flag by their name. Kim from South Korea, Mao Zedong from Japan. These two skaters who are among the top in the world, who both have a chance at the Olympic title. And in fact, Yoona Kim won the gold in 2010 Olympics, while Mao Zedong won the silver. So obviously, two skaters that are super talented, the top of the top, and they're from two countries that have historically been in conflict. And so I believe the relationship between South Korea and Japan is much better these days. And I believe Japan has also kind of admitted to a lot of the atrocities that they committed back in the 30s and 40s during that time period. And then, yeah, I believe that has happened. I remember even reading one time that Kim and Mao Zedong themselves were kind of put on this, like, it was some TV show or some media PR kind of thing where they wrote letters to each other or something, and they kind of try to understand each other as friends. But I do honestly think that this main rivalry was not really between the skaters, because again, like I said earlier, Wikipedia and Reddit have said that they used to be closer friends in the past. So it might have been more fueled by that, like, very fierce nationalistic patriotic views from both of their countries. But again, definitely a lot of complicated historical thinking within that, for sure. So that was the first type of rivalry that I'll discuss, the international slash political slash historical rivalry. Okay, next we have kind of a similar idea, but instead of an international rivalry, it is a domestic rivalry. And so this is when two skiers from the same country compete for the same title, the same Olympic spots, the same Grand Prix spots, the same even favoritism, or even the same, judging from, appeal from the judges kind of thing. When you are two skaters skating in the same country, you run into each other a lot, for sure, right? Obviously, in the US, for example, a lot of the US skaters often run into each other and have these kind of domestic rivalries because they see each other at Skate Americas and they see each other at Nationals, and those are very big events that everyone has to attend and this and that. And so it ends up happening is that you see each other like 4 or 5 times a year, maybe. You go to the same training camps, you go to this, you go to that, you go do the same like PR promo things, and you end up running into each other a lot, even though that person is supposedly supposed to be your competitor, which they are, obviously. But I think it's very much intensified when you take it to that rivalry level. In the US, one good example of a domestic rivalry, I think, would be Michelle Kwan and Tara Lipinski at the 1998 Olympics in Nagano in Japan. Michelle Kwan and Tara Lipinski is definitely I think, it's definitely a popular story to tell in figure skating, but I think it also reveals a lot about American sports culture in general. Michelle Kwan and Tara Lipinski, they were both star skaters from the USA, both young, both going into their first Olympics in 1998. But Michelle Kwan had been an alternate in 1994, but she is here in 1998. Both of them had been very successful on the world stage. For example, both of them had won world titles. I believe Michelle Kwan won in 1996 and Tara Lipinski won in 1997. So obviously they were both had been world champions. They both had a lot of competition success heading into the Olympics. I believe in the nationals heading into the Olympics, Michelle Kwan won over Tara Lipinski. And then at the 1998 Olympics, uh, Michelle Kwan ended up with the silver, while Tara Lipinski ended up with the gold. So both of them from the USA, both of them right next to each other on the podium. When Tara Lipinski found out that she won, it was kind of the scream heard around the world. It was the biggest scream and the kiss and cry that anyone had ever heard. And Michelle Kwan was in second place, having made, I believe, a minor mistake on a jumping pass, I believe. And so what I think what was interesting about this rivalry was that it was so American. It was so American focused. It was so, I think, again, nationalistic, but not against countries, but really within countries. What I mean by that is that it was like, who is going to bring home the glory for the United States of America? Was it going to be Michelle Kwan? Was it going to be Tara Lipinski? Or were they even going to like be taken over by another skater, like Chen Lu from China, for example? And so I really do think that I think the domestic rivalries are really interesting because not only are they kind of within the same country, but they also kind of are affected by international perspectives as well. Like, okay, what if this one skater from like France beats both of them? It's like, okay, well, maybe one of you guys can beat them, but like I said, I think, specifically focus on like the American side of the Michelle Kwan and Terry Lipinski case. I think it's just so kind of surreal in that way, and also because American nationalistic patriotic things like to focus on people from their own country, and I think that adds to the pressure of being the best for your country when people are kind of rooting for both of you, but you want to be able to have more of the public favoritism over your supposed rival or your supposed enemy. I think so. Yeah, that would be the domestic rivalry. So of course, kind of related again to the international rivalry, but instead within the same country. Okay, this one is not really affected by nationality or by country or representation or anything. This is rather a rivalry within skating style. So this is actually within the skating on the ice itself. And this is when two skaters have very different skating styles to the point where I feel like their conflicting styles becomes the main focus of the rivalry. It's not the country they're from. It's not how old they are. It's not how much experience they have. It's just how differently they skate and how dramatically differently they skate. And they're both really, really good. Both of these skaters, maybe one is just more technical and one is a little more finesse and has a little more finesse and has a little more style and this and that. And that's the point where their conflicting style, when they're both at the top of the world, maybe they're number one and number two in the world, that conflicting style becomes really the main focus of their entire rivalry. So my example here in the men's event would be Nathan Chen and Yuzuru Hanyu. And, this was very quite recent. This is probably definitely in 2018 Olympics, 2022 Olympics was one for sure as well. Though I want to say it was probably back in 2018 was the main one, and then it kind of developed over the next quad. 2019, 2020 was a huge year or season for this rivalry, I feel like, between Nathan Chen and Yuzuru Hanyu. Now, why was this such a different skating style? I do think that Nathan Chen was seen as the kind of tough guy. He was almost seen as the guy with a little bit coolness, and his programs were very much built around that cool personality. He wasn't doing many classical, elegant, let me dance for you kind of programs. It was kind of punk programs. It was kind of cool programs. He was skating to music that was interesting. I remember his like trap Mozart mix back in 2021, and it was just different. It was very like tough and almost brutal, but like kind of punk, kind of street, and the skating style matched that. It wasn't hang on to edges for a long time. It was skating very fast and skating very almost tough and really stamping down those skates and things like that. He was even known as kind of the quad king. Emphasis obviously on the quads because he did quads, but I think he was very, with the king title, very tough and gruff and trying to be very moxie and superior. And I think that's kind of the vibe Nathan Chen had with his skating. Now, to contrast, Yuzuru Hanyu was a lot more different, I think. He was really seen as the more elegant, he was the more, skating skills oriented skater, who had, instead of maybe king, superior, very moxie king vibes, he had this very elegant 1500s prince vibe, maybe, where he was a lot more focused on the elegance of the skating. He was holding on to those edges. He was holding on to the spread eagles. He was holding on to this. He was holding on to that. He was really having that nice natural flow within his skating instead of maybe having it at like Nathan where it was a lot it was still natural, but it was kind of very taking influence of the body, trying to figure out how to look tough and gruff and kind of big and energetic on the ice. And usually Hanyu, I feel like, was a little more laid back and relaxed with his approach to skating. And so I think those two very much had different styles. They were both doing quads. They had both been, world champions, and they had both been this and they both been that. But I think in the skating styles, I think that's where a lot of people kind of took them to different heights in their rivalry. Was that their technical was and sorry, their skating style in a way was just way different from, I guess, the norm, I guess. So yeah, that one is Nathan Chen and Yuzuru Hanyu. Okay. Next one I want to talk about is almost related to the last one, and it's a little bit about skating skills, but not really. And that is artistry and technical rivalries. So not necessarily in the skating skills, but more about the emphasis on where the skating goes. So, when maybe one skater is more focused on the artistic elements of the sport, and another skater is more focused on the technical elements of the sport. And so, there is this huge debate, and I've talked about this before in a video essay, is that the debate between artistry and technicality and the technical score in figure skating is quite large. There's so much debate around if we should be focusing more on the technical side of skating, if we should be focusing more on the artistic side of skating. Which one is better for the future of the sport? Should we be encouraging kids to go do quads and quintuples, or should we be encouraging kids to focus a lot more on the elegance and the facial expressions and their skating skills and how they compose their programs together? Very huge debate, and it really has been a debate for quite a long time. But I think in recent years, in the midst of the quad revolution in the singles, for example, it's really been a big debate. But my example comes actually from ice dance, which I feel like is a field that has a very much subtle differences between skaters that are maybe a little harder to pick up, but these differences really contribute to a rivalry. Um, Here, what I want to say about Virtue Moyer and Davison White and ice dance. Virtue Moyer, like I mentioned in Program of the Week from Canada, were very much seen as, I think, the very dramatic, romantic, and artistic pair. Their programs were dark. Their programs were mysterious. Their programs were filled with a lot of emotion. Their programs were filled with a lot of, you know, a lot of interesting, very much interesting, I would say, chemistry. They were very much intertwined with each other's characters. They were playing characters. Their Carmen, for example, in 2013 is, I think, one of the most dramatic programs like ever. It features facial expression after facial expression, and it's just so fierce. And then obviously in their last program, their Moulin Rouge program, they were seen as the very dramatic, romantic, and artistic pair. But Davis and White were in 2018, so we're not going to focus too much on that. But more so like the 2008 era to the 2014 era. At the 2010 Olympics, for example, Virtue Moyer had their Malheur free dance. It was very artistic. It was very refined. It was very finessed. And then on the other hand, Davis and White were skating to Phantom of the Opera, and I do think they had the edge on the technical side. The technical side, they were good at getting lifts done. They were getting good at getting their levels done. They were good at getting the skating skills done, the components, etc. The GOE was really the main important thing. Not to say, of course, that Virtue and Moyer weren't technical or Davis and White were not artistic. They both definitely were parts of both, but I guess in the eyes of more the public perception, Virtue and Moy were seen as the more dramatic and romantic pair, whereas Davis and White were really seen as the very classic technicians of the sport. And I think that really led to a rivalry in that way because, again, you're having these two such conflicting styles in figure skating, while these two teams are among the top of the top. In fact, in 2010, Virtue and Moyer won Olympic gold and Davis and White won Olympic silver. And in 2014, those roles swapped with Virtue and Moyer winning the silver and Davis and White winning the gold. And it may have done with kind of their opposite switching. In fact, in their regard to the emphasis in their skating on the technical side versus the artistic side as well. And tons of other reasons as well. They both trained under the same coach for a while, which may have been even more tension. But we have no idea, obviously. But I do think part of it was definitely they're kind of a little subtle, not huge, as in or in singles, for example, where I think the gap between artistry and technicalities or technical score is a lot more obvious, a lot more apparent. But I do think in Ice Dance here it's about subtle notes, and I do think Richard Moore had that upper edge on the artistry side, and Davis and White had the upper edge on the technical side. So I think that's really what made their rivalry very much a thing in that regard. Okay, then we have I think is the very classic rivalry, and I think that's really just I really hate you as a person. It's just like I cannot stand this person and I hate them, and that's why we're in a rivalry. And this is just when two people just literally hate each other so much that it becomes a rivalry that is probably so much pettier than it should be. Just these two people, like, just imagine you and your best friend just break off and now you hate each other. I think that's the kind of rivalry that we're going for in this segment. Is you just can't stand each other. You don't want to see each other. Just you hate each other so much. And I would say that these don't really happen in figure skating. In fact, I feel like I put kind of this one more as a joke or like a meme, I guess. But the I really hate you as a person rivalry, I feel like a good example of it would be Johnny Weir and Evan Lyschek leading up to the 2010 Olympics. Johnny Weir and Evan Lyschek were both American skaters, so they were in a domestic rivalry as well. Johnny Weir really much, the artistic skater, Evan Lyschek's, very much technical skater. And here, I think Johnny Weir and Evan Lyschek they were honestly it was a strange era. I saw this mention on Reddit, I believe, that there's this interview clip on YouTube going around where Johnny Weir is like, I really just cannot stand Evan Check as a person. Like, if we were not like skating together, I would not be friends with him. I would not talk to him. I would not do this. I would not do that. And it was kind of petty on his part, but I guess it was like for the TV. So, he had the permission to be petty in that way, even though obviously that's still not okay to like say you just hate somebody like that. But yeah, Johnny Weir was shit up. Like, I just don't want to see Evan. Like, he's just not a good skater. I don't find him cool. I don't find him this. Evan Lyschek, on the other hand, apparently did not really care about it. He wasn't really into drama and more his own skating, which is definitely a strategy onto itself, in itself. So, maybe that's the strategy is that if your rival is talking trash about you, just ignore it and move on and focus on your own skating. But I don't think Ivan Lyschek ever had the same very negative feelings towards Johnny Weir, which is interesting. But, honestly, this rivalry was probably really fake. But we actually like never know. But yeah, Johnny Weir and Evan Lyschek were kind of trying to beef. Like they weren't really like actually arguing. They were actually just trying to argue, which is interesting for sure. But trying to argue and actually arguing are probably not the same thing in that way. I don't know. They weren't like throwing things at each other on the ice or anything for sure because they probably weren't skating on the same ice anyway. But I do think that at least there was that kind of kind of contention between them, and it definitely was a not exemplified, accelerated, I guess, or kind of boosted by the fact that again they were both U.S. skaters, they both had different styles, etc. But I think the main kind of thing was kind of those interviews, and people were just like, "Dang, Johnny, like how could you say that about your rival? Like you need to like respect your rival. Why did you just say that you just can't stand being near him?" I want to find the exact quote, but definitely go search up Johnny Weir, Ivan Lysacek arguing, or Johnny Weir, Ivan Lysacek beef on YouTube. I think you'll probably find a few interviews here and there where they are interestingly so different in their views of one another, and I think that makes the figure skating interesting. Again, probably does not really affect the skating itself. Maybe they're just more motivated to beat their rival, but not really affected in the skating itself. It wasn't like this was mainly because they had different skating styles, though they did. It was mainly because they just had very much big rivalry between each other. So I think that was definitely very interesting. Okay. And then the last thing I want to know, which I feel like I have kind of gone through this before, is that all rivalries can kind of mix together. I'm not saying that this is just this type or that is that just that type of rivalry. There's definitely multiple reasons behind a rivalry. For example, when I talked about Virtue Moyer and Davison White, Virtue Moyer from Canada and Davison White are from the USA. And obviously Canada and the USA are neighbors, and I won't say that they're necessarily rivals in any way. I feel like they haven't had a lot of negative history as far as I know, a ton of negative history. I think more of this was just like, hey, our neighbors to the north, our neighbors to the south, like, we're a little we don't like that. We don't like kind of being near our neighbors. And they were both trading in Michigan, which is kind of I think it was Michigan, or was it no, I think it was Michigan. I don't think it was Wisconsin or Minnesota. I think they were both trading in Michigan together, which is obviously a border state between Canada and the US. And so I think that has to do with it too. The original thing I said was that, it was an artistry slash technical rivalry, with Virtue and Moyer being artistic and Davis and White being technical. But I do think Virtue and Moyer and Davis and White were maybe caused a little bit by like the Canadian versus US thing, the friendly fire, the friendly neighbor thing. But on this podcast, we love Canadians. Okay, we do not disrespect our Canadians. Even though I am from the US, we do not disrespect our Canadians. Another one, for example, would probably be Yuna Kim and Mawasada. I said that it was just because it was an international political rivalry. I do think Yuna Kim and Mawasada genuinely did have different skating styles and skating skills. Yuna Kim was a very, very refined skater, and she wasn't going for the big technical elements, but rather for the big Jui. Mawasada was a very fast skater. She was getting the speed, she was getting the technical scores for sure, trying the triple axels and trying the crazy combinations that got her a ton of points. And so it wasn't necessarily just because they were South Korea versus Japan, rather, but also because maybe a little bit more artistry versus a lot more technical emphasis in that way. Okay, I wanted to end this segment or this episode off with kind of the idea of my own personal thoughts. Of course, on the rivalries and what I think it is. Are they real? Are they a product of media, etc.? To me personally, and you obviously might have a different view, because that's totally okay to have a different view on this podcast, and you can leave me a comment state kind of saying what your view is. But honestly, my main view is that these rivalries never really seem too personal. Obviously, there are probably exceptions here and there, but honestly, they never seem too personal. Like, it doesn't seem like they actually hate each other and they actually want to despise each other and they actually just can't stand the fact of being near the other person, like, at all. I don't think necessarily that's what these rivalries are, because they just don't seem like that. I just don't think they are kind of like that. But, they might be, I guess. We never know. Obviously, I think as an outside viewer, as an outside fan, we can never really know really what a skater is thinking. Maybe like this person really does hate Yuzuru Hanyu and can't stand skating against him. Or maybe, this person actually really likes Yuzuru Hanyu, but the media is saying that they apparently hate each other. I don't know. And so I don't think, unless you can somehow infiltrate the mind of a figure skater, you can really never figure it out that way. And I do think that, another thing to know is that skating in itself is more of an individual sport at the end of the day. So, pitting yourself against other people is not as common as like tennis or something. In tennis, it is very much player versus player. And I know this because I've been watching way too much tennis recently. And tennis is much more, player versus player, and it's not very much like, I wouldn't say it's really like based on country identity or the style of tennis or anything. It's very much more player versus player, as far as I know. And so we have a lot of these big rivalries, for example, like Yannick Sinner versus Carlos Alcaraz right now in the men's, where they're just both really good, and they are always just they're always being pit against each other and always being, called rivals and this and that, and they're one of the greatest rivalries of all time in tennis and things like that. But I think in that case, because I think that in tennis, your score, or the way you like succeed, is a lot more dependent on how the opponent does rather than skating. Because in skating, obviously, you aren't going against one opponent, you're going against like 23 or 29 other skaters. And, at the end of the day, obviously, all those skaters can make mistakes and they also, may contribute to you winning. But at the end of the day, skating in itself feels like a more individual sport because you are kind of the person responsible for your own results and your own fate. Obviously, maybe your main rival has a terrible skating day and they get second while you get first, but you still were responsible for getting yourself first because you could have had a bad day too in that way and you still could have not gotten first. But I don't know if that metaphor ever kind of makes sense, but I feel like skating is also a personal like responsibility thing where you are a lot more responsible for your own score because the downfalls of your opponents don't matter as much as your own personal, how well you personally did. But yeah, that's just my thought is that the rivalries never seem really too real because you're still responsible for your own skating. It's not like the other person cursed you to fail. I think you're still responsible for your own kind of skating. But I would say that in general, I do feel like the rivalries are a product of media, and it says a lot about the society we live in. It's not necessarily a personal thing between people, necessarily in general, because the figure skaters don't. Figure skaters honestly seem too nice to be hating on each other like that badly. I don't know, because again, I don't live inside the brain of like Ilya Malinin or like Isabel Lovito or anything. So I don't know if those people actually hate their figure skating competitors. But from the outside view, from the outside perspective, as a fan, it definitely does seem like more of a product of media, and it's a product of getting people hyped and very interested in everything. And I guess it does kind of makes sense. And honestly, I would say that maybe this is just more of an American perspective on sports because American sports love a good story. I remember Gracie Gold said, kind of Americans love a great story about an underdog and about a comeback and about what is it, a fallen angel, I think she said. And maybe that doesn't really apply to rivalries all that well, but I think the main idea is that just Americans love the drama. Americans love the inspiration. Americans love the tension and the conflict and will this happen? What if this happens, etc. And maybe it's just America that does this. I have no idea because I've never lived in another country and kind of experienced the sporting culture there. But maybe it just is America that really just enjoys the drama of it all. I don't know where else. Maybe it's just a natural human thing. I don't know. But in America, I feel like in the advertisements and the commercials and just in the general commentary, it is very much focused on the rivalries, the this versus them, the he versus him, the she versus her, etc. Yeah, very overall, I do think that understanding these rivalries in figure skating and just in general is a very interesting perspective on society, especially American society. Like we love drama and reality TV in America, I feel like. And maybe there is an overlap between the reality TV fans and the figure skating fans. I do know a lot of figure skating fans enjoy things like Dance Moms and like America's Next Top Model, which might have some drama spilled here and there. And figure skating also has a ton of drama in the lore. And I will say that perhaps the drama and the kind of the fabrication and the creation of drama gets in the numbers and the money in for sure, right? If we have this huge rivalry and then these two skaters are skating at the same competition, everybody is gonna come watch because we want to figure out who's gonna win this drama, who's gonna win this rivalry, and who's gonna do this, who's gonna do that, and it gets in the numbers, the viewing numbers for sure, and it gets in money because of the commercials and the ads. And in a sense, figure skating needs all it can get, all the money, all the numbers it can get. But fake drama is just I feel like creating fake drama between and fake rivalries between skaters is kind of weird. So maybe creating drama to get money to entice people to watch you. Not sure if that's the most ethical thing at all. um you know for sure, not sure if that's very ethical to kind of say that, hey, there's all this drama going on, you should totally come watch, you should totally do this, and then the drama is actually not really real. I don't really know. Maybe that is not the most ethical thing, but that will probably be another conversation for another episode, because that is all for this episode. I really did enjoy making this episode and kind of looking at how the outside world views skating. Obviously, I think the main thing to draw from this episode is that the skating perspective from the inside, from the skaters' perspective, is way different from the viewer's perspective. The viewer gets fed a lot more information from the media than the skater themselves, and the viewer gets information about these rivalries and all this drama and this and that happening, and we see it on the Reddit, we see it on the Twitter, and I feel like perhaps in the actual figures for the actual figure skaters, that drama is maybe not as active in their lives. They're more focused on themselves and their own skating rather than all the drama that is revealed on like Reddit and Twitter and stuff, or X or whatever. But yeah, I think that's really the main thing to say. But yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed this episode of a Teen Talk Skating podcast. My name is Van Gogh. If you guys enjoyed listening to me talk about the idea of rivalries in figure skating and all the great rivalries and how they kind of categorize themselves in different types of rivalries, as well as my own personal thoughts about how rivalries are most likely a product of media and especially American society, as we love our drama and reality TV and everything we can get. Again, I really did enjoy making this episode, so I would love to hear you guys and your feedback on it to see if you guys would love more video essays like this. But I will see you next week for a couple of competition reviews with the Challenger Series John Nix Paris Challenge and the Challenger Series Kinoshita Group Cup, which both have a lot of big skating names to know and a lot of things to review as we get into the Grand Prix season and the Olympic season. After that will be a lot more competition episodes until we reach the Grand Prix season. But don't worry, the video essays will still be coming here and there regularly. So as I get more interesting thoughts about the world of figure skating, I will still be making these video essays. But that's all for episode number 84 of a Teen Talk Skating podcast. My name is Zango. I hope you enjoyed. Check me out next week or listen next week to listen for the Challenge Series John Nix Paris Challenge and the Challenge Series Kinochita Group Cup. Thank you so much, and bye bye.